So good morning.
Good morning.
I'm so glad to have you here Saturday morning and end of the conference. So what I'm going to do today, as Dr. Perkins was saying, I want to talk about some things. I want to give you an overview of transportation. I want to talk about some of the research going on. We're going to make it a bit interactive, so you're going to have some questions. And we'll talk about careers as well. So we talk about transportation, right? And what's transportation? It's a safe movement of persons and goods over time and space. Different objectives, different methods, right? So we have all kinds of ways of doing it. We have shipping, we have railroads, we have rural roads, freeways, airports. And we can characterize it by things being transported, right? Are we doing freight or people? Type of vehicle, is it a railway, is it a car, is it an airplane? The type of right-of-way, right? So that's transportation. That's sort of the theme. Why is it a theme? Well, we're a transportation center. US DOT is paying for the conference, and they want everyone to be interested. They want people to go into transportation. Does that mean you have to go into transportation? No. I mean, I started from the beginning. We want to give you information. This is what we're doing. So I know there's some civil engineering majors in here. This is actually, could have been what's an engineering system, but I'm going to ask the civil engineers, what's a civil engineering system? Okay. So if you're in civil engineering, you go out, we take some elements, we resist a load. That's essentially what engineering is. You have a demand and you have a supply, and you try to do it economically. And almost everything we do in engineering is that. So if we're talking about a structural system, we have beams, we have columns, we have foundations, and we put those together to resist a load, right? The dead load, all the weight of those things, as well as the live load, the people in there, whatever you're putting in the building, wind load, and you try and do it for 20 to 50 to 100 years without failure, right? That's what a structural system is. And that's when you go to do civil engineering and structures, you learn how to put those together economically, right? And we took some tours. We saw a football stadium where that was done. If you've been walking around, you saw the Pinnacle Bank Arena where that was done. How old is civil engineering? Well, approximately 4,000 years ago, Hammurabi put it together a code. If you could take law, it's one of the first things you learn. But if you take engineering, it's also some of the first things you learn. If you go to the Louvre in Paris, you'll find this. It's his code. And it says on that code, he has a set of laws. One of them is if a builder build a house for a man and it does not make its construction firm, and the house which he's built collapses and causes the death of the owner. Oh, I got music. The owner of the house or the builder will be put to death. Okay? That's our first engineering code. We don't do that now, but we're still liable, right? Where's Dr. Jones? Dr. Jones, you were talking about, what did you say? That when you don't do something right, people die, right? Well, 4,000 years ago, we know that if you didn't do something right, people die. They put in the law. They must have had trouble with houses back then, right? So they put in this nice law. Here's Mr. Hillman. He does bridge work. What's he doing? I know he's standing under a bridge. What else is he doing? Sorry? No, in a way. Okay? He goes back to what Hammurabi was writing about. So he isn't inspecting a bridge.
If it doesn't fall on you, it's not good.
That's right. So when is he inspecting the bridge? This is the first time the bridge is used. And so if you go work for a railway company and you become a bridge engineer and you design bridges for the railway, they've been doing this for hundreds of years. They say, you know what, before I drive that train over, I want the engineer under the bridge. And they still do it. So he's standing there the first time the bridge goes. Do you have to understand what you're doing if you're designing bridges? Yeah. If you're standing under that bridge, are you kind of focused on what you're doing? Right? He's perfectly safe. We build bridges all the time. They're safe. They do this for fun because they know they've done it correctly. But it goes back to what Dr. Jones was saying, right? We want it done correctly. How much different would it be if you're designing a dam and you have to live under that dam? Right? Would you do things differently? And hopefully you wouldn't. Hopefully you would say, I'm going to design it as if I was living by that dam. Right? So it's a kind of a neat picture, but that's what we do in engineering, right? We design things, put them together that we know are going to be safe. And we have other examples, right? There's the Brooklyn Bridge in New York on the left, been around for about 120 years, 130 years. Pont de Garde in Paris is an aqueduct built to bring water to Arles in France. Still works. And it would still, these aqueducts built 2,000 years ago, still work. You still walk across them. You can still use them. Some of them are still in use today. So when we talk to economical life, 50, 100 years, sometimes it's 2,000 years. What's a transportation system? Well, we have elements and we have load. What are the elements? Highways, arterial roads, local streets, traffic signal signs. We put those together to handle some demand. Vehicles per hour, maybe it's how much freight we have, how much tons, how many passengers. Right? That's what a transportation system does. It's a fail-soft system. So we would say it's fail-soft in that if the system fails, right, it's not a huge problem, right? A bridge is a fail-hard system. If a bridge fails, we have a major problem. If a dam fails, we have a major problem. If our system fails, we have congestion. I'm not saying that's good, but it's not catastrophic, right? People are not dying from that kind of thing. Total U.S. expenditures, transportation actually adds about 20% of the gross domestic product. So we spend a lot of money on transportation, both personal and freight, which is why it's such a major part of it. You're in Nebraska, right? So having a good transportation system helps our economy, right? So if you have a significant impact on the area, so in rail, we're the second largest state in terms of ton mileage. We have, if you've walked around, you saw those tracks, we get 150 freight trains a day through our state. We're probably the largest freight corridor in the world when it comes to freight between BNSF and UP. We also have I-80, the interstate system. And the whole point on this slide is that countries that have a really good transportation network are usually leaders in industry and commerce. So if you look at US, Japan, Germany, when China was developing their infrastructure, what was one of the first things they built? Transportation system. They basically copied the interstate highway system in 10 years. They put in a high-speed rail system that covered their entire country in 10 years because they knew if they wanted to have a strong economy, they had to have their people be able to move and their freight be able to be moved. So what's transportation engineering? Well, it's everything. And that's really what I wanted to get across today. Is I'm a civil engineer and everything, oh, you're talking about civil. Well, I talk about civil, but it's really everything. It's aeronautical, it's chemical, it's mechanical, it's electrical, it's civil, it's economics, it's environmental, planning, statistics, psychology, and human factors. All these things that I'm listing, public administration, law, business. I've worked with faculty and students in all those areas. So it's a very broad profession, and we need lots of professionals in every aspect of it. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm not an engineer, I can't go into transportation, or I might not have it, that's actually not quite true. There's so many components to it. And if you want to solve engineering problems, which we're about to talk about, you need all these expertise. So one of the things you probably heard over the last few days is you want to develop yourself, you want to go and do a master's. One of the things you're going to learn as you go on your career and work in your jobs, it's going to be a lot more multidisciplinary. We used to work, well, the engineers work over here and these people work. But if you're trying to operate something or solve a problem, you really need everyone working together. So when they talk to you about, oh, you need to work in teams, that's not a joke. You're going to be working in teams. You're going to be working with people with different expertise than you. And you're going to be important because you have your set of expertise. They're going to have theirs, and you're going to have to be able to work together to solve common problems. The nice thing about transportation, it's people-oriented, okay? Because what are you doing? You're doing things for people, right? And it's also taking problems and finding solutions to them. So it's one of the things I enjoy is we have issues and problems. Can we come up with solutions to those problems? So, what's a transportation problem? What do you guys think a transportation problem is? Traffic, so congestion. What else do you think is a problem?
Poor road condition.
Poor road condition. I'll agree on that. Anything? Accidents, so crashes. Flight delays, yeah. So congestion, both on the road and in the airport, all those things. And those are things you experience, right? So let's see what I have. Congestion. Right? And it can come in many forms. So let's see if we can get this going. Oops. And they warned me not to run this. Okay. So Dr. Norton talked about being in Japan. Okay. Okay, notice the white gloves as they push you into the subway. Okay. So I wish Dr. Norton was here because I could ask her if she's been on that train. Okay. There they go. Okay. I've been on the train. I did not get pushed on, but I know when the train came up, it was packed. And when I say packed, I mean people were like pushed against the glass. There must have been 20 people in front of us. And I thought, well, there's no way we're getting on this train. And it just was like a human wave right into it. And the door shut. Classic engineering problem, right? We have supply, and we have all these things we can put in supply. We have all these trains, and we have this demand for people. Right? So you can think, well, I can make the trains longer, but you can only make them so long because you have an underground system, and it can only be as long as the platform. Those trains come every 3 minutes in that picture, okay? Which is why they have to get the people in for the next train to come in. It's that busy, okay? So it's a congestion problem, but you have to figure out a way. How do you take all that demand and handle it safely? Now, we are not that way in the U.S. Fortunately, our worst congestion isn't like that in trains, but it's the same principle. We find that with cars, right? We're in these awful traffic jams. What's a transportation problem, right? We said crashes, right? Is that a problem? Right? So, oops. And it'll warn me. Okay. Okay. So everyone actually walked away from that accident, so we're not showing anything really awful other than a horrific accident. So red light running is a problem. How many people die in the U.S. every year from traffic crashes? Anyone? 30,000, 35,000. It's actually going down. The rate's going down. The number are going down. Still way too many, right? Probably everyone in this room knows someone who has been in an awful crash, right? And has impacted their family. And in fact, our accident rate for the first time in years, our crash rate is going up. Anyone have any ideas why?
Cell phones.
Cell phones, right? Distracted driving. Right? So we have to come up with solutions. What's a solution to what I just showed? Has anyone seen any red light running solutions that they've seen over the last 5 years? Yes, ma'am.
They added the little yellow lights to tell them to slow down.
That's right. So we can give advance warning, and we have that in Nebraska.
The
Camera.
They can put on cameras. They can do enforcement.
Sometimes there's a delayed response to the green light, so even those so two lights can be red at the same time.
That's right. So they do an all red phase where everything's red. All right, and then people get smart about that and they go, we got time, we're going to run the red light. You've probably also seen that you can change the way you set up your system, right? You get rid of the traffic signals, you put in roundabouts, right? So why are roundabouts safer than intersections? You have to slow down, right?
It's already set right away.
Is it set right away? The biggest thing, you're slowing down. What type of accident did you see here? Yeah, T-bone, right? You do not want to be hit from the side or head on. With a roundabout, if there is crashes, and there are crashes at roundabout, you're going slow and you're sort of going into each other. And I'm not saying you want to do that, but it's much safer than a T-bone or a head on. Another transportation problem, increased freight, truck traffic, railway traffic, truck waits. This is actually a picture from Canada of trucks waiting to come into the U.S. to clear security. It is, and if you go down to the Mexican border, you'll have the same thing. It's a huge issue, is the amount of congestion we're getting with freight, because our freight network really hasn't grown that much, but the amount of freight has gone up a lot. This one was related to security. How do we get things into our country and still be secure? So freight, we're going to increase it by 40% by 2040. If you've driven on the highways over the last 20 years, you've probably seen a lot more trucks. You've probably seen a lot more trains. All that's going on. Another issue related to it is about 48% of that movement is hazardous goods. Right? In our area, we have highly flammable crude oil from the Bakken oil fields up in North Dakota coming through Nebraska down to Texas. In 2009, there were 10,000 carloads of this stuff going through the U.S. 2014, 5 years later, 500,000 carloads of crude oil being shipped on our railways. And where are they shipped through? Communities. Right? These things, yes ma'am.
Is carloads a unit, or is that like...
It's a unit. So think of a tanker car on a railway. You've probably seen them. They're sort of roundish, cylindrical. So there's 500,000 of those going through the U.S. And we have it's amazing how much bad stuff we have. Toxic and poison inhalation hazard. We have chlorine gas. We have just an amazing amount of stuff coming through our communities that are hazardous. And we have to be prepared for releases from that. And so, if we have for example, if we had a chlorine tanker car crash, we would have to evacuate everyone. There's absolutely no safe way with chlorine. You'd have to, and so there have been cases where they've had derailments and they've had to evacuate 200,000 people in 10 to 15 minutes. So you can imagine, you get these warnings, you have to get out, because if it releases, there's no safe way to handle that. So here's our freight. Here's 2002. You can pick out your own part of the country where you're at. The thicker the line, the more the freight. And that's going to be 2035. Okay? So if you think there's a lot of trucks on the road now, if you think there's a lot of railway cars, we have to figure out a way to solve this problem. Right? And the answer is we're not going to have freight, right? Because freight's critical to our economy. But how do we handle these things? I talked about hazardous goods. This is Lac-Mégantic in Quebec in Canada, which is about 10 miles from the U.S. border. They were bringing Bakken oil crude to the eastern Canada. So this was crude from North Dakota. They had a crash at night, It was 50 carloads of this oil. It's highly volatile. This is a picture from the next day. So at the bottom you can see the train. That was a town completely burned down by the oil, the crude oil. So what happened, it was a crash. The train derailed. It all ran into each other. It all caught fire, and it basically burned down the town. I think over 50 people were killed in this fire in the middle of the night. So when we talk about hazardous goods movement, these things are real. They are happening. There's been cases in Tennessee where they've happened. There's been cases in Texas. Probably not as bad as this, but it is a problem, and it's something that we have to address. Our center is looking at how do you react to these type of events? How do you prepare communities for hazardous goods? How do you perform evacuation? So we had the hurricane in Houston. We talked about evacuations. Evacuations can happen anywhere where you have this type of thing. How do you get information out to people, and how do you get them evacuated if something like this were to occur? What's a transportation problem? We talked about aging infrastructure. I heard that one, yes? So when did we build the interstate system? Anyone know their history? About the 1950s it started. It was probably completed in the 1970s. How long do we build highway bridges for and roadways? About 50 years. Pavement about 30 years. So every time you drive around your interstate, what do you kind of notice? Always under construction, right? Why? Because we built it 50 years ago. Okay, so people from Houston. Do you know where that is? Close. It's Galveston Highway. So that's a road from downtown to Galveston. Slightly different view now, right? What's another issue coming into the U.S.? You see, one of the things you're going to find out, particularly for the students in this room, is aging population, right? So this is a core, this is a graph. On the y-axis here is the ages, right? So how many people 0 to 4, how many 5 to 9? And it just shows percentages, right? So this is how many, 20 million, right? But you can see percentage-wise how many people there. What do you notice about this one? Well, in 1970, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, so 20 million were over 65, and they were about 10% of the U.S. population. Okay? We come up to 2010, not that long ago. 41 million people over 65, 13%. And notice that we don't have this distribution of lots of young people and very little old people, older people.
Thank you.
I'm out in there. I'm at that stage where, yeah, not young people. But notice here, it's more evenly distributed, right? And then if you project this out to 2050, right, well within your careers, we're going to have 90 million people over 65, 21%. Is that a problem? Not for me, but for you people that have to. So, but we have to have, how we set up our system to drive, right? We have aging drivers. We're going to have to help them be able to live, to get to the places they need to go, right? There's actually another problem for you. This has nothing to do with transportation. There's another issue for the students in this room, right? How does Social Security work? You don't get it till you're 65, but there's a more. You have to work. So when you pay Social Security, does this go to a bank, and then when you're done, you get that money back? It goes to the people there, right? So when we start, back in 1970, these people's Social Security came from all these people. When you are in this cohort, where is your Social Security coming from? These people, right? There's less workers for the retirees. So when they hear, oh, Social Security is going broke, Social Security won't be able to handle itself, it's because of these graphs, right? There are not going to be enough workers to keep the same benefits we have now. Okay? So they're going to have to do, they can increase what the Social Security tax is, They can reduce how much people get for Social Security. You know, I'm not sure what they're going to do. Here's what I tell my kids. It'd be great if Social Security was around. I'm not convinced it will be. So when you start your jobs, what I tell my son is 10% of your income, go into retirement. It's going to be tough, but you're banking on something that may not be there if you're worrying about Social Security. So it's always good to, you talked about planning last night, right? It's good to plan ahead. Nothing to do with transportation, nothing to do with this conference. Not going to be quizzed on it, but does that, well, that graph is why. It's just the way it is, right? So I have a feeling that we're going to be, my children's generation is going to be much more self-supporting themselves, right? These ideas of pensions and all that. My son got a job. There's no pension. And the first thing I said told him was, and he has a very nice job. He's a computer scientist. The first thing you have to do is set up your own. You're going to have to save your money, and you have to start now. And don't touch that, right? You think you want to go to Cozumel or Thailand, right? That's fine. But you really also have to take care of business first. You have to take care of yourself, because when you get to this age, right, it's not like, oh, I'm going to keep working. You might not have the opportunity. You might not want to. You want to have the position to do what you want to do when you get older. So that's my soapbox. I'm sorry. But that graph also affects what we need to do in transportation. Oh, I got that again. Oh, here we go. So what are the potential solutions? So one of the things we talk about, just build more. Let's build some more roads, right? We'll have it constructed, we'll make it wider. Right? If you live in Dallas or Houston, they're always making it longer. How long does it take to widen a highway in Dallas? Any ideas? Yeah, I'm not exaggerating. It's 30 years. By the time they plan it, we want extra, because they have to do environmental, they have to get the money, they have to get the land. So they say, oh yeah, let's expand the ring road. You're talking 30 years by the time they thought about it to the time it was done. So what are the issues? Well, there's politics, right? I don't want a bigger road. There's limited resources. We built right up to the highways. How do you take that land back? Right? You have to pay people. You know, it's not fun, right, to take people's land, expropriate it to build things. So one of the things that we're doing, and you're going to see in your careers, are new techniques, more intelligent use of available resources. We call it ITS. So you have a problem on the freeway, you have a crash, you detect that crash, you have a traffic management center, that all that information comes back. You can use it for dispatching, you can use it for evacuations. You can do it for variable message signs. You can put it on the internet, you can give it to the in-vehicle. Right? ITS. Right? So gather information. We say we're in the information age, right? Eric says we're out of the information age, but that's sort of what we're doing. What do you notice about this slide? You say, no, Dr. Rilett uses really old technology. Look at those computers. No one has a screen like that anymore. Who has that in their car, right? I got my cell phone. I used this slide 25 years ago. And the reason, and it hasn't changed. What's changed is the technology. We have better detection, right? We have better video. We have better computers. But, you get on, how do I find my route? How do I get data? The data might not be coming from the computer. It might be coming from the car itself. It's probably coming from your cell phone, right? Do the cell phone companies know where you are?
Yes.
All the time, right? When you signed up for your cell phone, did you sign away some stuff? Right? You just hit yes, right? That's right. Did you read it? No. So what you signed away was we can track you, and we can sell that information to Google or Waze or any of these. So they know that if they see the cell phone going at 60 miles per hour, you're probably in a car. We know how the travel time on the road is. We can send that back to people. We can sell that information. All of that's changed, but the concept hasn't. Gathering information, providing it to people. And then the last one that you're going to see, related to ITS is just getting smarter. You've probably heard about autonomous vehicles, right? Cars that drive themselves, right? Where are we going to see it first? Well, you see these pilots around. My prediction is we're going to see it on trucks, freight trucks, on the road, on the highways, because it's simpler to be on a highway than anywhere else. The logic, the algorithms, because you're on a fixed location, there's benefits to having the trucks together from a platooning point of view. So my prediction is we'll see those on the roadways, on the highways first. The other concept is connected vehicles, where the vehicles talk to each other. Hopefully so they don't crash into each other. Hopefully so they don't crash into a bridge, so that that the car will make decisions before the driver will and avoid some of those crashes. There's all kinds of legal and technical issues, but that's sort of where the future is going. Whenever you start with all these problems, crashes, congestion, if the cars drive closer together, do you reduce congestion? Sure. If you can make it safe, you can reduce congestion. So you don't have to build more roads, you just have to use the roads you have better. But that would involve connecting the vehicles, getting them closer together in a way that's safe. Okay? That's the future. The question is, can we reach there or not? Okay? So what I wanted to do was give you an overview of transportation careers. I wanted to show that it's very broad. Right? We have in our center, I was talking about the how we have chemical engineers working on ways to make it safe. If there is an accident, you don't have that oil vaporize and explode. Okay, that you can add supplements to it, so that saves it. So it's very broad. Almost anyone in this room, I should say almost everyone in this room can go into transportation. Doesn't mean you have to, but there is an opportunities there, and that's sort of what we wanted to get across on this presentation.